when Andrea and I built this class, or started building this class, we wanted to try and build it around these 5 kind of characteristics of play. And so you'll see each one of the days we're going to be building around those ideas. And today's big idea is around this idea of meaningful connection. And so one of the activities that we're going to do, and I'm about to introduce our co-collaborator with, is the way that we think about how excited we are about the work that we do, and those connections of wonder and play, and what brought us into our world, and the different things that we do in our professional lives. And so what we thought about doing was kind of being able to tell the story of our connections and think about how we can use that to connect to other people, be it students or people, if you're, you know, Susie, in the work that you do for PBS. How can we make these meaningful connections? And I have this wonderful co-collaborator that I get to work with on the regular, that's part of our university library, actually a tri-institutional library, Diane Fritz. We get to work on this really cool project where we're having undergraduate students use public data for public good. And we can talk about that down the road, because I want to make sure that Diane has some time to introduce herself and talk to you all about this really cool platform that's a storytelling platform that's connected to kind of, if we would like, geographical locations. So without further ado, Diane, nice to have you here. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I will do a little bit of an introduction of myself, but mostly I think I'll get to do that some through the story map that I started building when I was doing a little play discovery myself yesterday. So story maps are what we're going to talk about today. And I think it's so great for all of you, because whether it's mathematics or dance or piano, different kinds of things, this is a platform that I think is really good for building a narrative, but you can also discover ideas while you're in it, and just messing around with trying to put images and thoughts together. And as you do that, you can discover during this kind of play. And I'll share that a little bit more in depth. But so quick little bit about me. Some of the people that were early onto the call realized that I was originally from New Mexico, which is why I have this lovely background picture that I have here. Yanis actually made me remember that when I was little, my great uncle, even though was sort of in a food desert, he had a Greek food store, and he would just mail me Kalamata olives and halva all the time. So that like, I grew up in New Mexico, but with this sort of semi-Greek heritage. So I'm now in Colorado, and I am a geospatial services specialist at the library on the same campus with Dennis and Andrea. So what that means is I help people make maps, but I also help them just kind of work with geography and where things are tied to space and how that interacts with the things that they're thinking about. And that can be anything, right? So if you're taking dance lessons and you were in this small little town, you can build a narrative about how maybe you went from there and ended up dancing in amazing theaters in New York City. And that space is part of your story and how you developed, right? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And the thing that I want people to look at first, and I'll just kind of bring this Chrome window up so that you can see the meaningful experiences. So this is that connection where we're going to build story maps about what is our narrative, what connects us to the work that we're doing. And if you scroll down a little bit, there is a link for a document that I'm about to show you, so you can all access it directly, but it's right here on that page. And this document looks very boring, but it's useful. So we're gonna kind of skip over looking at Alan Carroll's blog, but if you do want to go back into that, he is the person who started the StoryMaps team, or this technology that we're going to be looking at. And you've already collected a bunch of images, but I'm going to show you some other places where you can get some or that might be useful. And so these are two places that might be good to look around at if you don't have any in a folder somewhere for what we're about to do. And I'll go ahead and open that web page later. But the one thing I want to make sure is that people have understood these ways of creating an account to be able to build a story map. So in this document, there's a URL that's just storymaps.arcgis.com. ArcGIS and Esri kind of get interchanged. They're basically the same company, so just that can be confusing, but I wanted to point that out. But this is the URL that everyone should go to and click sign in. Some of you may already have an account because your institution is already associated with Esri. If you do, just go ahead and use that account. But if you haven't had one, you can get a public one by going to that URL. And then when you click sign in, this little thing will pop up. And I've circled in red this little thing that says create a public account, and just use a personal email address that you're going to want to have for a really long time. Or if you feel really confident where you are with your email address, go ahead and use that. And that's how you'll be able to log in the future. So I'm going to introduce a few story maps just so you can kind of see what we're talking about. But go ahead and make sure that you can get into this count while I'm doing that. And I'm going to go back to my other Chrome. And on that document, there's a link that goes right here to explore stories. And if you scroll down, there's a whole bunch of ones that we can click into. But I'm going to share just a few that I've seen that I like, and then show you a place where you can get some images to kind of put into one of these. And then we're going to take a short break because I think we've been sitting here for a while. So I'm going to show you a couple of stories really quick, give you a chance to kind of move around them, get up, go get a drink of water, do whatever you need to do. And then we'll come back and start learning how to actually build one of these. So the quick tour of some that, and you can get that from that Explore Stories. This is an example of a story map that some people built about the amazing river that goes through London. And they did this with an ecological focus. And so you have basically this narrative that you can just scroll down and put in some orientation to what your story is going to be about. You can have a map if you want. The thing is, the story maps, you don't even have to have a map. It's mostly a scrolling narrative platform. But if you do have a map and you want to tie your story to geography, there are great ways of doing that in here. So this is one that actually has just all of these places on that map and photos from each one and some scripting going next to it of each spot that talks about what happened at different points. And as you go down, this is a different part of the story where now we're going to see some things on one side of the screen that then interact with parts on the side if my internet connection is fast enough for my map to update. There it goes. So it will change if I'm going to a different location along the Thames. It will move along that map, or that we're flowing down the river in this whole narrative. So I will go ahead and put the URLs of some of these particular story maps in the chat so people can look at them while we take our break. But I wanted to share one that you can put a lot of intensity, a lot of STEM background into this if you want to. So the hardest working river in the West, this is a story map exploring the Colorado River through data. So this one's actually pulling in a lot more intense learning. So you can build that into it too if you want to. And so this one, if you explore down, they're talking about water supplies and ecology and amazing, gorgeous pictures that set the context of it. And then they have some pretty elaborate maps that they've built in a different system and brought into here. And we can talk about how to do that as well. I have just two more that I want to show really quick. This one I think is interesting because these are about buildings and locations in New York City. My computer's having a little bit of a time trying to load this. But what it does is it has, this one isn't map-based, it's more just images of these landmark places, and it's broken up by decades. And there is so much content in this, but it's a really exploratory platform where when people come down, they can kind of see and read and get some background. But when they get to this spot right here, you'll notice that there's one of 17 things in this location, and you can click through a timeline that they have of how these things were put in, some data about the places you're about to look at, and then these designations, they have images of each one. And you can explore through that or just scroll down and get into the 1970s because you realized you didn't really care about the 1960s, right? So it's the thing that's really great about StoryMaps is that they're very interactive and it allows exploration even of the reader when they come there, depending on how you set it up. So the last one is really geospatial data intense, but part of the reason why I wanted to show it is that not only can you load stills, you can also load videos into the background of the different parts of your story map. So this is about a Japanese internment camp that is very just south of Denver, Colorado. That this was, in reality, it was there in World War II, and this is a digital reconstruction or a map reconstruction of what it looked like versus a picture of what it looks like now. So you can have these videos pulled in as well too. So I'll put those 4 URLs in the chat. And before we go, the one quick thing that I wanted people to look at is this really great resource for images to be able to pull into the story maps. The Smithsonian, they just released nearly 2.8 million images to public open access. So you can grab these things and use them for whatever you want. So if you want to go in here and say, I want to look at pianos, and I click search, then it will pull up a lot of open access resources. It has 2.8 million things to dig through right now, but you can find images and videos and other resources that have no copyright worries. So one thing about StoryMaps is that they are public on the web. So you do have to be a little bit concerned about what kind of content that you put in there if it's not your own. So when you are working with K through 12 and you don't want to talk about copyright because that's difficult, you can bring your students to this open access resource and let them find all sorts of information in this space to be able to dig through things. So I think if we come back at 11:30, then I will go into how to actually do this and talk about the exploration of one that I started building yesterday. But we've been sitting here for a little bit of time, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but come back in at at about 11:30, and then we'll kind of go into diving into that. And if you want to pop questions into the chat about, hey, Diane, I don't know, my login isn't working, I'll go ahead and answer those in the meantime.